Welcome to the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast, where we hope to inspire you to embrace your God-given gifts, skills, and passions in order to lead with confidence. We want you to remember that you are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God, and you are fully loved by Him.
You have been designed on purpose by God with unique gifts and passions in order to love and lead those around you. I'm your host, Esther Littlefield, a pastor's wife, business owner, mom, and writer.
And I'm Esther's co-host, Holly Kane. I'm a wife, mom, and business owner. I also write at hollykane.org, where I focus on my passion for women's ministry.
Together, we chat about important issues that Christian women leaders face. In addition, we interview other women just like you who lead in various roles, from church to community to business. Through this podcast, we offer you encouragement, tools, and resources to help you on your leadership journey. We are so glad you're here with us. Welcome to the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast. Today, I am here with my guest, Laura Howe, and we are going to be chatting all about caring for the people we lead, specifically in the church context. So welcome, Laura, to the show.
I am so excited to be here, Esther. Thank you.
Yeah, I am excited to have you here too. And I want to share with you, our listeners, that Laura has been on the podcast before. So today's episode is going to be a little bit different because we talked back in episode 81. We talked all about dealing with burnout, compassion fatigue, and mental health as a Christian leader. So if you have not listened to that episode, you're going to want to go back and hear that one because Laura shares her leadership journey and we get into so many great topics in that episode. And it's actually one of our most listened to episodes ever, which Laura got a little bit, I don't know.
I had no idea.
Excited / afraid when I told you that. So, but today we're going to talk more about just ministering to people in our church context. And I'm excited for you guys to hear this. So be sure, like I said, to go back and listen to episode 81 if you have not heard that one. All right. So Laura, one of the things that you are really passionate about and one of the things you do in your work is you want to help churches have an effective care ministry. So to start off, for someone who might be like, what is a care ministry? Can you tell us what you mean by that?
Definitely. So, yeah, I never realized that care ministry is, in my mind, that's like, I know what it is, but I guess with many other people, it could look really differently. So when you asked me that earlier, I was like, okay, let's do this. Let's figure this out. And I really believe that it's meeting people where they're at and supporting them to overcome whatever challenges or struggles they may be facing. I really believe that it's part of the discipleship journey. It's part of meeting people and helping them grow and develop and overcome and find freedom. And doing that within the church context. We can do that with friends. We sometimes do that with professionals, connecting with people and talking and getting support to overcome. But a caregiver ministry really is about doing it in the context of your relationship and the church that you belong to. It's a core need to feel safe and to belong. And I think care ministry really provides this in a church when people are at their lowest, right? So if you don't feel safe to share your vulnerable, dirty, embarrassing struggles, or when you're facing challenges that are just completely overwhelming, you don't know what to do, a care ministry allows your church to extend that sense of belonging, your faults, your edges, your scars, your wounds. You belong to the church of Christ and God and God's kingdom, and creating a place where it's safe to be you and vulnerable and to overcome with others. And I think that's what care ministry is.
Okay. Yeah. I just love that you pointed out that it's really part of discipleship because, it makes me think of like the way Jesus did life on earth with his disciples is that they lived life together and they, I'm sure, there's stories of them when they're at their worst and they're making mistakes and they're messing up, and Jesus is there to care for them and guide them and give them the support that they need. And so it's a similar thing that we need to be doing in our churches, not just giving people a place to come on Sunday and listen to a sermon and leave, but like a place where their lives are truly changed and transformed, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that
absolutely.
often happens outside of the context of a 1 hour service on a Sunday.
Right. It's life.
Yeah.
Life is complicated. Life is messy. And so when you're actually able to do life with people, there's a internal change, both the person receiving support, the user of services or support,
Yeah.
as well as the giver of support. You're called and you're changed and you're being used. And I think there's a mutual growth that happens for people when they are involved in care ministry within a church.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So what does an effective or a thriving care ministry look like?
I truly believe that a care ministry needs to be as diverse as the people it serves. I have weekly blogs, and one of them, I talk about diversity and how it's so valuable in care ministry. And it was saying, if all of the people who are, labeled their care ministry volunteers, if they're all married, 50 years old, white, and have successful businesses, what externally we deem as successful or overcome, most people aren't going to relate to that. There will be some that will look to that. Success or strength is people look to that and they respect that, but they relate to vulnerability and weakness. So if your care ministry is as diverse as the people in your community, that's when I think it is thriving. It's different ages, it's different cultures, it's different experiences. I also think that it's very fluid. There's people coming into care, people coming in and accessing support, overcoming, growing, and then I think they return as care providers.
Oh, wow.
I don't think there's a definition of this person is always a care receiver and this person's a caregiver. I think it's fluid. And I think that's when it's healthy and thriving, when someone can have that journey of needing support, overcoming, growing, and then providing the support.
Yeah.
I think a thriving care ministry isn't dependent solely on the pastor. If a pastor is the primary or only person providing the support, they are going to get exhausted. They are going to be worn out, just like anyone would. I do think pastoral care and that lens of biblical counsel is very valuable and a needed and necessary part, but it cannot be the only part. And so when you leverage partners, community partners, and when you value experience and people's and you're equipping peers, or what I call peers, and people with lived experience who've overcome themselves. When you're able to do that, that I think is when there's a thriving care ministry.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. I love that you've painted the picture for us of what that would look like. And I really think that this point of the fact that it's not going to be static, it's not going to stay the same, is so important, because I think sometimes when we're, volunteering it at church in whatever capacity, or even staff people, they kind of feel like they're always going to be doing that thing that they're doing right now. And that's probably part of the issue that leads to burnout, is that they're maybe not intended to do that forever. And God has different things for them to do. And like you said, also, the whole goal here is for people's lives to be changed, for people to be transformed by the gospel and by the ministry they're receiving. But then they can go out and minister to other people and not just stay in this place of always, in the hurting phase of their life. Hopefully they're going to get healing and then be able to help others.
Yeah. That's kind of the recovery model in the mental health field or the healthcare field. That's what we call the recovery model, where needing support isn't a lifelong label or destination. It's fluid. You come in, you receive support, you walk away recovered, and then you can give support. And I think that's also takes away the stigma that helpers don't need help, right? So if you've been labeled as the person who provides care, how difficult would it be to seek out support when you're supposed to be the one giving the support, if it's rigid? So if we have this concept of everyone needs help and support, we're all human at some point in time, and you're able to come in and out and ask for support and receive support and give support, then I think that destigmatizes needing support for everyone, helpers and those who need the support as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's so good. So you mentioned a minute ago that one of the key factors of having an effective ministry is that it's not all dependent on the pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And so really my next question is, why is having an effective care ministry so important? And so clearly one of the reasons is so that the pastor isn't the ultimate and only person providing this for their members and their attendees, right? But are there other benefits or other reasons why this is important for the church community?
I think that points to when we were talking earlier about care ministry being part of the discipleship process. If your church is about small groups and the curriculum and focusing on curriculum of that, or the 1 hour, hour and a half service on Sunday and, coffee time, cookies and coffee for fellowship, then that's not doing life with people. That's not part of the discipleship process. But if we are meeting people with where they're at, seeing freedom and overcoming, it encourages the growth of the kingdom. I think your church will grow. People will be saved. People will hear about Jesus, because when people find freedom, they can't help but tell others, right? So if you are struggling and are facing challenges and then you find freedom and you overcome some really difficult times, you can't help but tell your neighbors or tell your family or tell your coworkers, because they'll see it on you. And so this really, by caring for people, you are actually spreading the gospel and the grace and the love and the freedom of Christ. And so I think having a care ministry fosters that and encourages those conversations and leads people on how to have those conversations of finding freedom and overcoming. So absolutely, having a care ministry is allowing to relieve the pressure maybe, or the sole responsibility on the leadership to provide care.
Right.
And allows them to flourish in ministry, and so that they have longevity in ministry. You're not burning them out. But it also, I think, grows the kingdom of God by people overcoming and finding freedom and sharing the grace and freedom and love of Christ with others.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Now, I didn't think of this question ahead of time, so I'm going to spring it on you.
I love
but
it.
How would a care ministry be different than a discipleship program or a small groups program? Like, what sets that apart, or how can it be incorporated into those things?
I think care ministry, now I am not a discipleship expert, so let's just put that out there right now. That,
Neither am I.
Anyone who's done like a master's of divinity, which I have not done, would be like, or theology would be like, she's a little off center. So put that, disclaimer out there that is not my specialty. But I do think care ministry is more than just helping people through problems. I think there's an intentionality to care ministry. And when you have an intentional, we'll call it program or ministry within the church that seeks out volunteers and equips them and supports them. And I keep going back to that word of intentionality, that discipleship is focused on maybe learning the word and applying the word to your life, where care ministry might be like, okay, when the rubber hits the road, how can we support people alongside that journey? And I definitely think that there's a significant overlap, because you want to apply the word of God to your struggles and your suffering and your challenges. 100%. That's where, it needs to, number one, align with the word of God. Absolutely. But when you have people who are intentionally trained or delegated to saying, okay, how are you really doing? How can we support you through this? What resources can I help you connect with to be able to walk that journey out? Because in the Bible, it doesn't talk about all the life struggles that we're facing, cell phone addiction or kids, struggling with anxiety, but there's a lot of applicable scriptures and things that we can learn to apply to that. Yeah. But you might need that extra bridge to connect with what the word of God says versus into how you can walk that in real life. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And I'm even thinking about, in the context of my church, like a lot of the ministry or pastoral care kind of stuff, we have really gone into the model of doing a lot of that through our small groups ministry, in the sense that the small group leaders are essentially the ones that are supposed to, kind of keep tabs on how people are doing in their group. But I think this next step of really being equipped to go deeper and identify resources and things like that, I think is so important. So can you tell me, because you mentioned, the idea of training people and equipping people. So who are the type of people that are needed in a church in order for this care ministry to happen? Like, what are some of the things or some of the types of people that would be part of this?
I would say they're very similar to those small group leaders. So they might be one and the same. You might,
Okay.
So this is where I'm saying it has a ton of overlap. But I would say look for the helpers. Look for the people who are chatting with people after service, who kind of have the pulse on people. They know who has lost their job or who, has lost a loved one or who's, struggling with this, that, or the other. The people who have kind of a pulse of what is happening in people's personal lives are the natural caregivers. And if you ask someone, hey, you're really gifted, you're really gifted at caregiving and supporting others. This is not a true statistics, but I would say 9 times out of 10, people would be like, oh no, anyone would do that. People do not value or do not see the gift of empathy and compassion. They minimize it.
Yeah.
And so you can't, when you're looking for volunteers or people, you can't really just say from the public, anyone who's interested in being a part of the caregiving ministry, please sign up at the kiosk at the back, or whatever, log on. And it's not going to work because number one, people are overwhelmed. I don't want to hear people's problems all day. They don't really know what support is going to be available to them, what it looks like, and as well as, people minimizing the gift. But if you're looking to start a caregiving ministry in your church, or if you're looking to enhance what you have as far as small groups or your leaders, then I would look for the natural helpers. And when we're talking about diversity, that's not all people who externally have overcome in life. It could be young people, it could be women, men, young people, seniors, middle-aged, people with different cultures, different backgrounds, different experiences, because the diversity really creates the safety of people saying, you know what, if they can do it, I can do it. So that's who I would look for, is those natural helpers. I think there needs to be a minimum level of maturity to honor the ethical responsibilities, confidentiality and boundaries, and someone who is willing to be accountable and be part of a team. I think there is some of those expectations, absolutely. But if you look for those natural helpers, the people who are, have the pulse on what people are doing in their lives, those small group leaders, those people who are like, you know what, that other person had a plumbing issue. They just went ahead and fixed it and no one knew. Yeah. Those are the people that you make fantastic care ministry volunteers.
Okay. Awesome. So part of the care ministry is the volunteers. It's the lay leaders, the people who are, they've got a job, they've got family, whatever going on, but they want to be involved in the church and reach people and support people. Are there other types of people that need to be involved? I'm wondering about at what point do you need to tap into professional resources or, then send someone to actually meet with the pastor if something is more serious? How do those other people play a role in the ministry?
Yeah. There are 3 types of care providers. One is professional. Those are those professional services, counselors, therapists, doctors who provide treatment, and they are generally external to the church. Some churches have the resources to have a counselor or a therapist internally within the organization, but mostly it's external. So they're one type of care provider. The other type of care provider are pastors, people who have trained pastoral counseling. They provide consultation through the biblical lens. Oftentimes that's seen in marriage counseling and things like that. And then you have peers, those who provide peer support, or people who have that lived experience. They've gone through the school of hard knocks and learned the hard way and have overcome. They have no professional training. There may be no theology training, but they are people who have overcome in their personal lives. And so between professional, pastoral, and peers, they're all valuable. They all bring a different approach to caregiving. And I think they're all really valuable. And for the churches who don't have the resources, which is probably 95% of the churches, to have those professional, I really encourage you to leverage your community resources. I have a guide that I offer that's called 3 Steps to Building a Sustainable Care Ministry Program or Care Ministry in your church. And that really walks through those 3 areas and how to leverage those community resources. Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome. Yeah. Because I think that's a sticking point for some churches and even for some volunteers that might want to say, okay, I want to do this, but what if I get into a situation that I can't handle?
Absolutely.
Someone has an addiction and I don't know what to do with that addiction, something like that.
Yeah, definitely. The professional caregivers would provide the treatment. Pastoral provides the biblical lens. Peers, you're supporters. You're people who walk alongside of someone through their struggle. You don't have to save them. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to find answers. It's that, I think of when I help my kids with their schoolwork, right? If I did my kids' long division, which is what I had to teach them while we were over when the kids were all at home, which was like a nightmare. But if I just did the long division for my daughter, oh my gosh, it would be so much easier on my life because there would be no complaining. But then her next unit is fractions and she wouldn't be able to do the next problem that was facing her. So I sit down with her. I got out the spoons out of my utensil drawer. If you divide these spoons into how many, we break the problem into different pieces. Yeah. We talk about it. We encourage, you can do this. I came alongside of her. And if as peer supporters, we do that same action, we come alongside of someone, we break the problem into smaller manageable bits. We maybe reframe the situation. We show that they're strong and smart and courageous and they can do it. If we come alongside of people as supporters, not as fixers, not as saviors, not as rescuers, that's such a valuable part of the caregiving ministry. Yeah. But you're not providing solutions. You're not in over your head. You are providing support and you refer to pastoral counseling and you refer to community resources. And so that's really what a care ministry is. It's having these intentional skills, these skills used in intentional ways where it comes together with someone directing it. I think that is a key component that we haven't really talked about is that having someone directing a go-to person. Okay, I talked to so-and-so and they're talking about, self-harm or they're talking about addiction or they're talking, what do I do with this? Then there's someone who would be able to access and knows these resources.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's so key. And what you just were sharing about this idea of coming alongside and supporting, I mean, that is the biblical model for how we're supposed to live life together as Christians, right? And I think somewhere along the way, at least in the American or North American church model, we shifted it to coming alongside each other and supporting each other to, okay, the pastor is responsible to take care of everybody. And I'm just going to go and then go home. And I don't have to help my friend who's going through a divorce or, be there for that person who just had someone pass away. And we had a guest on a while back, Carrie Bartkiss, and she talks all about encouraging that we can all do it. It looks different for all of us. And so it's really something that we all need to take responsibility for. But in the context of the care ministry, it's like you're saying, a little bit more intentional. There's specific people that maybe are designated to be there to support people in various situations in the church community.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. All right. So let's talk about for those who are in a church and maybe they're like, okay, I can see that we need this. We have one, but I'm not sure if it's working. Like, what are maybe some signs that a church's care ministry is not functional or is not meeting the needs of their members or their attendees?
Well, number one, I would think is that you have a burnt out, worn out pastor. I think that is definitely part of it is that, the leaders are worn out. And you might not know that if you're not part of the leadership team. So if you are a leader in a church and you're feeling weary or resentful or numb to people's struggles, then that might be a sign that it would be helpful to kind of develop that a little bit. Also, another one is I was consulting with the church and they were like, we have these people complaining, their cat died and we didn't come and pray with them at their house. Like, really, is this so unrealistic? And they were kind of rolling their eyes. And I was like, okay, I get that. Yes, some people's expectations might be a little bit out there or,
Yeah.
a little bit too high for what the expectation. I said, but if you had someone that said, hey, I don't know how to access kids ministry, or I don't know how to access small groups, someone would say, you as an organization would say, oh, maybe we're not communicating how to access. Maybe we're not communicating the roles of responsibilities or how to do this or where to go for that information. I said, so when someone provides you feedback and we can interpret that as complaining or unrealistic expectations, maybe reflect on that for a moment and say, okay, how are we communicating what our role is as a church in caregiving or things like that. It would be a sign to me that your church care ministry might be struggling if expectations are out of alignment with what you are able to offer, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
People don't know who to go to. People, do you do home visits or don't you? Or, what can we do? And I don't think that means it's failing or, anything like that, but it might mean that it's not intentional or people just don't know how to access it, or it's not developed in a way that people are able to utilize it.
Yeah. And I think even what your point there that stood out to me is the communication about it. Like we need to actually know what's available, have a plan for how we're going to help people, and then communicate it to the church on a consistent basis so that they know what to
and
do.
we do that. And we do that with Kidsmen, These are the groups that we have. Here's when it starts. Here's when it ends. This is how you sign up. This is how you register your kids. And this is what the kids are going to receive in the program. We do that with small groups. We do that with giving. We do that with, a lot of different areas. But when it comes to care ministry, it can feel uncomfortable because we don't have all the answers. And if something is uncomfortable, we tend to avoid it. So let's look at this. Let's look at it in a way that same way we would any other ministry that we have in our churches, and see how we can communicate with people to be effective with caring for each other.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So good. All right. So maybe there's somebody listening and they are involved in their church. They're a volunteer or they're on staff maybe, and they're like, okay, we don't have this set up. We're not equipping people. We're not being intentional about it. Maybe it's very lackadaisical, whatever it might be happening. It's just like, oh, people, the squeaky wheel gets the grease like that.
Yes.
The one, the people who really are loud about their needs get their needs met, but there's lots of people probably under the surface that aren't. So what are some of the things that a church would need to do if they want to establish or maybe refine and develop their care ministry?
The first thing I encourage people to do is to leverage community resources. And you can do this whether you're a church of 15 or you can do a church if you're 15,000. Leveraging your community resources is vital for the well-being of the pastor and the well-being of your people. Knowing what resources are available in your community and building partnerships and relationships with those so that when someone does come to you, you know who to refer them on to. It exponentially grows your ability and transforms your ability to care for the people in your congregation when you know what resources are available in your organization. The second one is building a team and looking for those helpers in your church and looking for the people who can come alongside of you and who'd be diverse and effective and open to connecting with other people in a way that they're supported and supervised. Yeah. And then the other one is building, and the third one is developing a training strategy. So just telling people, hey, can you be a part of this caregiving team? And then sending them on their way. This is not going to be helpful for you as the leader, them as the volunteer, or your people in your congregation, because everyone's just going to be like getting mixed messages and doing things different ways. So developing a training strategy or an intentional way on how to grow the skills of your volunteers is the third step.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. And that's something that you cover in your guide, right? Of developing this ministry. So
those are the 3 steps. And then we go in. And then in that guide, there's a template that I give to help with that first step. So leveraging the community resources, there's a whole template in there about who to connect with. Here's the different types of resources in your community that you can look for. Because someone might be like, I don't even know what to Google. I don't know what they're called. I don't know what is even out there. So it's a 3 3-page template that says, here is a bunch of resources. This is what they're called in the community.
Okay.
And this is how, you can start looking and recording the information and building those partnerships.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that I'm going to try to remember, we had a guest on another episode where we were talking specifically about counseling, and that, sometimes churches and pastors hesitate to tap into resources in their community because they don't necessarily always align biblically or theologically.
Yes.
Is that something you address in the guide, or do you want to just kind of address that here briefly?
Absolutely. So when in the leveraging community resources section, in that first section, I talk about how to build partnerships.
Okay.
And so how to frame the conversation and how to connect with people. In the very first thing I encourage people to do is look within your congregation. There's likely a nurse or a teacher or a counselor, or, even librarians are part of the public service system. And so there's likely someone in your church that is some way connected to the social or behavioral health and services of your community. So start with that. And then in the guide, it goes through how to frame the conversation, how to build partnerships and things like that.
Okay. I love that. So good. All right. So Laura, is there anything else that you would want to share that I didn't ask you about, just in regards to this whole conversation of meeting the needs of the people in our church? Anything that I didn't touch on?
Something that stood out to me that you said is just in that last bit when you said, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So people who need the needs are loud. But I'm going to tell you that there are people who have needs that are quiet and they might not be standing out. And so if you're listening and you're saying, my church is doing all right, people are moving along. I think if you offered and presented this as an offering or looked at this as a strategy, you will find that it really builds your community. It builds the relationships and the community bonds connection with your members and your congregants, but it also builds the connection with your community. And there's a couple different sides of this coin, that it helps you as a leader to lead, and it also helps people to follow and to grow. And that's what we're all here for. We're all here to grow the kingdom of God and to tell people about Jesus, and that this is where it goes back to. And so I think that it's not just a program. This is actually part of the building the kingdom of God that I think is really, really important.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I think that the thing that is kind of resonating in my mind as you're talking about this is, it seems like a lot of times what happens in churches is that people come, let's say someone comes to church, they get saved, they start a relationship with Jesus, and then they kind of get pushed right into serving and being on the front lines of ministry. And there's kind of sometimes this big misstep in there, which includes discipleship, but sometimes also includes this idea of them actually experiencing some more transformation and healing before they jump right into serving. So I'm curious to know your perspective on that. Do you think that the church is kind of missing the boat when it comes to that piece of the process? Or do you think it's okay to plug people right into serving and getting them into kids ministry or, greeting or whatever it might be, right as soon as they get involved in the church?
I think it depends on the person. I truly believe that when we start looking externally at others and serving others, we lose focus on our problems. We don't look at ourselves. So serving and giving and looking externally is a great way to shift the conversation in your mind and to shift the focus away from your inner problems and issues. And that can come as twofold. So that can be really, really healthy and helpful to give people hope and experience outside themselves. But, there can be some people who throw themselves in and use serving and giving as a distraction rather than dealing with some of the internal issues. Addiction, this is kind of pushing it to the extreme here. So this isn't everyone, but addiction is distracting and self-soothing so you don't have to deal with your stuff in any capacity, whether it's a substance or a behavior. And so when we throw ourselves into serving and giving, and you have people there from the time the doors open to door close, you might want to have a conversation with them to see if they're avoiding other issues that might be going on. Now, this is so the few minor people.
Yeah.
So for the majority of time, absolutely, I think serving and giving and jumping in and looking external and growing your capacity is healthy. And I think it's helpful, because when we completely focus on inward and ourselves, it becomes very narrow and negative. So by looking externally and being a part of ministry, definitely I think is healthy, as long as it's not the sole purpose and intention of the church to serve itself.
Yeah. And I think just the whole idea of the intentionality here. So it's like, if you get someone new, you get them plugged into ministry, there should still be someone there kind of supporting them and checking in and making sure that they're also being discipled, that they're also having their needs met, and that way, hopefully we can catch it if it goes to an unhealthy place where they're avoiding the issues that God needs to work on them, but they're kind of avoiding it by just doing all the things.
Yeah. And I think it's important to note that care ministry isn't for only new believers. It's for us. It's for you, and it's for myself, and it's for my friends. It's for everyone, because, we all have grief. We all have loss. We all have struggles. We all have suffering. And so the concept is mainstream when everyone needs care. Everyone can give care, in context, like not everyone, but you know what I mean? Everyone has if everyone needs care, then, it's an ongoing thing. It's not, just for new believers or just for people who look different or sound different than us. It's everyone.
Yeah. So good. So good. Well, Laura, this has been really helpful. I think that this is going to be a really useful resource for anyone listening who wants to see their church thrive and wants to see their church grow. And really, it comes back to, we need to be healthy. We need to be making sure that we're meeting people where they're at. So I think that this is going to provide them a lot of guidance and tips. So thank you for sharing all these thoughts. So we are going to wrap up as we usually do with leaders or learners. And I always like to hear, is there something that you are learning right now, or that you've listened to lately, a podcast or, a book you've read, any resource that you think would be helpful to our audience?
Right now, this is a vulnerable moment. I am learning that rest is way more necessary than I realized. So let's just put that out there. At the time of recording, and in my region, we are on lockdown. So no school, everyone at home all the time still. And so round three, people, round three. And so I am recognizing the need for rest. I'm recognizing those signs in myself, even though I have done this for 15 years. And so for me, I think there are two main things. If you can find rest when you need it, and you can connect, those two things right there will get you through. So for me, that is what I am learning.
Yeah. I'm there with you. I believe that's so important. So, and sometimes it's harder to do when you're down.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. I am not a creative person, but I went and I got a paint by number kit to force myself not look at a screen, because all I want to do is work and not look at a screen. And I listen to calm music and paint by number. And I never thought I would like it. And I do. And so I was like, okay, we are going out of the box here. Let's do this.
Yeah, we do have to be creative sometimes in how we get the rest. It's so true. So, okay. Well, another thing that I'm going to throw in here at the end is, Holly and I usually wrap up with asking each other a fun question. So we've decided to start asking our guests a fun question. So, so I have pulled one from my deck of cards. So here it is. And this is going to make you maybe a little sad, but hopefully it'll also be a dreaming question. If you could go anywhere on vacation, where would you go and why?
Oh, I'm going to be honest. Okay, so I have booked tickets And so I'm really hoping and I'm dreaming I can get there to Victoria, BC, British Columbia. So I have family that I haven't seen out in British Columbia. I'm Canadian, if anyone hasn't guessed that from my accent already. And so if you haven't been to British Columbia, you can go to the beach and you can go skiing all in the same day. And I've never been there, and I want to go climb the mountains and see some whales. So that is where I hope to go.
That sounds amazing. Yes, I would love to do that. I love traveling, so I just want to go all the places, but that definitely sounds amazing. Oh, awesome. So Laura, as we wrap up, where is the best way for people to connect with you, and tell us if you have anything coming up or, any resources you want to share? This is your chance to do so.
Okay, so you can connect with me at email. Like, I love connecting with people. So you can email me at laura@hopemadestrong.org. And that is my website. I'm going to be honest, I still kind of keeping up with the social media. I need to learn a lot from you, Esther, around that. But so you can find me on social media, Facebook and Instagram, but mostly Facebook because I'm old. And I have weekly newsletters and vlogs. And there's 2 events that I kind of want to put a plug in, if that's okay.
For sure.
I have a May event. It happens every year on Mental Health Awareness Week. So at the time of recording in 21, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It all blends. It's all blending. It is May 3rd to 7th. And so it is Church Mental Health Refresh, and it's about training. Would be if anyone's wanting to develop a care ministry, this is a great opportunity to train your team on things like mental health and addictions and domestic violence and lots of good stuff, compassion fatigue. And then I also have an October event, and that happens on World Mental Health Day, October 10th, which is every year. So it's easy to remember: Mental Health and Awareness Week in May and October 10th in October.
Okay.
And these 2 events are all about the intersection of faith and mental health, and providing some awesome resources with some incredible speakers for your church.
Okay. Amazing. And if somebody wants to get the guide of the 3, I forget the name of it. I'm sorry.
I kind of did too, but we were talking about it. Truth be known, 3 steps to building a sustainable care ministry.
Right. We'll put the link to that in the show notes. So if you want that, you can head over and grab that as well, because that will be really helpful for somebody who wants to go deeper into what we talked about today. So amazing, Laura. Thank you so much for being a guest for the 2nd time on the podcast. We just love having you here, and we appreciate all that you shared.
It's been a blast. Love it.
Thanks for joining us on the Christian Women Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, come and join us in our private Facebook community. We would love to get to know you better so that we can make sure the podcast is providing what you need. Plus, you can share your questions and ideas, and you'll be surrounded by incredible Christian women leaders. To join the group, visit estherlittlefield.com/group. Now, don't forget, your leadership matters, and it's time for you to embrace your gifts and lead with confidence.